Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Harmony United Psychiatric Care Podcast. My name is Marilyn Santiago. I am the Human Resources Executive here at Harmony. And today we will be discussing a challenging yet very important topic, the impact of social media on mental health in the youth population. And we have our very own Melissa Tamayo, certified physician assistant and operations manager here at Harmony. Melissa has been with Harmony for about 8 years now. She is a certified physician assistant and operations manager who graduated with highest honors from Nova Southeastern University. During her medical studies at Nova, she was trained in various disciplines of medicine. However, she developed a passion for psychiatry, realizing that this is an important yet often underserved field of medicine, quote unquote. She loves the outdoors activities and she enjoys helping others through volunteering as well as serving patients in the community. Welcome, Ms. Melissa. Thank you. It's a pleasure for having an opportunity to ask you a couple of questions about this important topic.
Okay, it was a good meeting you. I think the biggest thing we want to kind of address is not necessarily to kind of look down in regards to social media, but kind of look at it from both perspective, negative and positive, and just kind of the incorporation that it's become into our daily lives and just trying to make it to where we can balance it a little bit better down the road.
Right. I remember back in the early 2000s when MySpace started. Yeah, that's when I think that's when social media kicked off, based on my research. But again, I was in a different level in my age. So it wasn't something so attracting to me. I was curious about it, but not that attracting. But I'm assuming, right, that at that time, back in the early 2000s, the younger population were very attracted and probably curious about how does it work. Ooh, now we can communicate through the computer, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
it's become much more integrated from the MySpace days. Now we see it kind of across the span, multiple different types of social media. We see it kind of influenced even in TV, right? Referring back to
yes.
social media. So it's become kind of an extension to many people's lives. And we're just kind of wanting to learn a little bit of a better manner in which to address it, to live with it, right? And to not necessarily fear it, but kind of incorporate it a little in a little bit more healthy way.
Right, absolutely. And I do agree because it could be very easily abused and overused. The terms like Google it. We don't have an encyclopedia anymore, paper encyclopedia, which I do miss. I like books, right? So trying to get this younger population to enjoy books instead of everything being in the computer, to have other tools and opportunities, it's going to be very interesting how this pans out in the future that we may not see. So tell me a little bit about how does Harmony approach the treatment of mental health issues related to social media overuse among the youth population? I'm curious about that. How do we work with our patients?
Yeah, I think it's something that's become much more noted. We see a lot of patients coming in with that as a primary concern rather than a secondary. And I think it's important to kind of see what's actually driving it. What's the underlying reason for that misuse or that overuse of social media, and trying to kind of maybe identify and start there to try to correct maybe that overusage. A lot of the times we're seeing patients that have maybe untreated or unknown issues with depression, anxiety, ADHD. And these have certain symptomologies that can kind of cause you to maybe just get distracted or get kind of hyper-focused on social media to try to escape, right, from addressing those things. And so the goal as a patient maybe that comes to Harmony is trying to figure out if any of those things are contributive and trying to then address those so that we don't have necessarily that issue of that overuse or that misuse of social media.
So, treatment plans that we have available as an organization, as a company for our patients, as a provider, you are a medication management provider. So how do you tailor how do you design the treatment plans by age or by severity? What are the things that
Mhm.
you look at when designing a treatment plan for our patients, for our youth?
I think we do take into account the patient's age. If we see younger children, for example,
Mhm.
as medication management, we try to see if there's something behaviorally that could be done, right? Could we maybe start therapy and try to hone in or figure out or diagnose if there are some issues maybe with anxiety, contributive to other things, school bullying. There's a lot of things that kind of lead to anxiety or lead to depression, and trying to maybe manage it and address it there. So we tend to see kind of maybe that prioritized a lot in the younger, patient basis, as well. If there is a need for medication, that can also be explored to try to help with some of those symptoms of anxiety or depression, trying to manage them a little bit better. With adults, adolescents, similarly, right? Maybe the issues are things that could be addressed just behaviorally, right? Just in therapy, and get them started with some cognitive behavioral therapy, help on their self-esteem, and try to hone in on those kind of properties and try to improve them. And then if there's a need, let's say residual symptoms or things that they're still having a hard time dealing with despite trying to behaviorally change, then we consider kind of medications that can again help reduce some of those symptoms so that they can apply a lot of those things they learn in therapy and be successful with it.
I've seen that many parents at a just give their cell phone to their children that are 2, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
Um, in my time, of course, we didn't have a cell phone, right?
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I'm not in the new age. I'm in the little older age, but we didn't have a cell phone. So
Mhm.
it was, you have to stay still, right? That was discipline, period.
Mhm.
Nowadays, discipline, I'm going to give you this tool for you to stay still. And I feel that that is engaging, right? The
Mhm.
overuse as they grow older. Do you agree? What are your thoughts about, here is a cell phone, here is a tablet. Oh, Christmas, Santa Claus, or whatever is it that you believe in? Here is a tablet as a
Mhm.
gift or a birthday gift, instead of here's a book or or a game that will maybe make you think, crossword
Mhm.
puzzles, things like that. What is your intake on that? I've
Oh,
never had the opportunity to ask this question, and now that we're in the podcast, that I have this opportunity, I don't want to. I want to take advantage of it. So, what is your intake on that as a
fair.
provider?
Yeah, screen time is definitely kind of that gray area for a lot of people. It's become commonplace to have children with tablets. They walk around, they have their tablet. It even has a holster that they have personalized for themselves. So I think people have become a little bit more accustomed to social media, even tablets, a lot of apps, right, for a form of entertainment. And although it has its place, and there are some educational apps that you can do on there, artistic, right, expression that you can do on
Mm-hmm.
there, I think it does facilitate down the road for that to become an outlet and the only outlet, right? Just add another app or find something else, that maybe interests you, but all within this tablet form. That I think it does hinder a little bit when that's the only and the sole kind of purpose of entertainment. It hinders a little bit as you get older to be a little bit more diversified, less sedentary, right? Exercise or go paint, go actually paint, right? Get your motor skills. Read a book helps cognitively for retention. So I think the screen time in the younger kind of population definitely needs to be kind of tailored back a little bit. We even have now a lot of schools that use tablets, right? There's no notebooks. They use
Mm-hmm.
tablets for their math,
Yes.
for social studies. Everything has kind of been computerized. And although there's some positives to that, in regards to saving your work and quick editing, I think it does take away a little bit from kind of that well-roundedness and being able to kind of do different things and be able to put a tablet down and get up and run and go exercise, which we know has a lot of benefit on the emotional side and physically too, right?
So, on that note, what roles do therapy and counseling play in these treatment plans?
hmm Yeah, I think when it comes to therapy in general, right, the goal of therapy is to kind of help maybe some issues that you're having, help reset some behavioral patterns, and then hold you accountable to them, right? So I
Right.
think that's the big portion that makes therapy a little bit more effective, because a lot of people say, well, I kind of knew that. I went to therapy, but I knew I had to do that. But when
Mhm.
you're only working with yourself, you kind of you put little doubts in your head, like, I'll do it next week, right? I'll do it tomorrow. I'll start next.
Procrastination.
Yeah, I'll do it next Monday, right? And you justify it. You say, well, I was busy this
Yes.
week, so I'm going to start it next month, and for sure I'm sticking to that. And then it's been a year, right? And you never really held yourself accountable. So I think on the therapeutic side of it, although some of that may be common knowledge, it does help, right, in regards to keeping you accountable. If you're supposed to do something, we're going to work on trying to reduce, let's say, screen time by this much this week. And when you come in that following week, right, we're going to say, okay, well, how much did you reduce it by? How did you feel, right? Was it hard? Was it easy? And then troubleshoot it from there. And I think that support system that therapy and counseling, has in that role is really important and helps so that you can actually continue to move forward towards that goal of minimizing it or making yourself a little bit more well-rounded outside of just the screen, right? That addiction to it. So therapy, it has plenty of roles in general, and we look at it behaviorally as well for anxiety, depression, right? Same thing.
That
We
was my
hold
next
that
question.
patient accountable for it, and they work on it, right? And if they really struggle, then there's someone else in there, a therapist, to kind of guide them. Well, let's try this, right? If that didn't work, let's try this. Let's try something a little bit different, and then trial it again, right? Until we find something that works, that's effective for that patient, and then kind of move on to the next thing, challenge, right? They're working on.
So you would say that the first step would be that therapy piece, and then if nothing else works, then medication management will play a role.
It depends on the person, right? Because sometimes it can be more situational, right? And
Mhm.
they're able to manage those surrounding those triggers, and therefore their behavioral changes and their response to that changes. For other people, they may have, right, some issues with anxiety to begin with, and their situation isn't
Mhm.
helping. And so in that case, that patient may need some medication and therapy, right, to kind of work through those things, considering both happening. But it depends. It's on a case by case basis, but ideally, right, you want to try to address those triggers first and then move forward. But medication's always there to kind of help.
Thank you. So does Harmony provide any educational programs, workshops that are focused on the impact of social media on mental health issues?
So not necessarily educational programs. We do look at kind of individual therapy. We're hoping to establish some group therapy as well, which I think will help a
That's
lot
great.
when it comes
Yes.
to addressing social media, because it's a very common issue and a lot of us fall into those patterns. Some can get
Yes,
out
we
of it, but
do.
some a little harder. So when you look at offering something like group therapy where you have access to meet people one-on-one, right? We're talking about kind of socialization and face-to-face. So meeting people with similar concerns, hearing that you're not the only person out there dealing with that, I think there's a self reassurance, right? Of, okay, I'm not the only person. If they've done this, I can do it too. Or maybe get some information of something someone has tried that has been helpful, and you tried and then it does help. So not necessarily educational programs, but something, in the aspect of group therapy would be helpful, and hoping to kind of get that going, soon here, offered by Harmony.
So Melissa, I have a question. How about because I know our topic is social media, but
Mhm.
would gaming fall under the social media, or is it
Not-
something similar, or
It's similar in regards to it being something that
addic-
keeps you
okay,
sedentary, right?
okay,
That stops you from being well-rounded, that stops you from doing things outside of just kind of the home, the isolation that
right.
social media sometimes provides and gaming provides. So it is a little bit different, but similar dynamic, right? That we still want you to be diversified, to have several support systems, different things that you do that you enjoy. So in case something isn't working, you can fall into, another aspect of it.
Very interesting topic. My goodness. So how does Harmony, because Harmony provides telehealth, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So how does Harmony incorporate telepsychiatry to treat social media related mental health issues?
Yeah, I think that's, when we look at a lot of social media, computers, AI, right? If you want to look at all that, we look at it in a negative light, right? Even today, I know we're pointing out kind of some of the negative things that require maybe treatment. But some of the positives, right, that we haven't necessarily discussed is kind of the accessibility of it, right? You have access
Right.
information, you have access to treatment. And that's kind of in the world of HCPC, you know, we offer telemedicine to be able to have access to that person that can't get into an office, but can still have a meeting versus via video, right? And be able to kind of address these same issues and work on, you know, their plan to reduce, in this case, social media use, or trying to treat any underlying issues going on. So that's kind of the positive when it comes to the social media aspect of it. There's a lot of things that even Harmony, you know, we have a Facebook page, right? We have
Yes.
a Twitter, an X page, where we can kind of reach out to people, have information that they're not alone, that this is something that people go through. Same with depression, other kind of mental health disorders. And then also gives them the information to get treatment, which I think is important. So there's positives to social media, not necessarily the negative. And those are definitely some of the things that are kind of highlighted there.
And, you know, based on what, in my experience, right, because I can't talk about patients itself, I'm not a provider, but based on my experience and what I've seen out there with my nieces and nephews, social media is like the last Coca-Cola in the desert, for crying out loud. If they don't have that phone that's working or that internet, it's like the movies, they do start screaming. And they will say, where is the internet? What happened? Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is like the new word of this is, I'm feeling well. I'm feeling Wi-Fi. If there's no Wi-Fi, it's like, my goodness, it's trauma.
Yeah.
So how do we tell them, or because I know there's a timing that you shared that we need to control the timing on laptops and or tablets or on the phone, but at the same time we want to control it, but we also want to provide them a positive impact. Hey, you have this laptop, use it for positive. And you have half an hour to maybe play or game or whatever the case might be. How, you know, what recommendations can you provide the younger crowd, not the parents, not yet, because the parents play a vital role here, but what can you tell the younger population, like to convince them, if you will, that, hey, social media is good, but it's bad in excess, you know? How do you do that when you're treating a young patient?
Yeah, and you look at it as a little bit of almost similarity to addiction, right? Screen time becomes like caffeine, right? It's you're wanting more. It can cause stress. It can cause anxiety. It can make you sleep deprived, right? If you stay all night on the phone checking. And there's always almost when there isn't overuse, there's that fear of missing something, right? Like who updated what, or did something happen, or let me check really quick, right? And then you completely get distracted from what you're doing, or you're not getting sleep because of it. So I think in that essence, treating it and looking at it as almost a little bit of an addiction when we look at overuse lets us kind of at least start there. I think therapy helps restructure that it's not all just that, right? That there's other things that you can be doing, and then trying to almost like reteach yourself, right? New things to do, new interests to do. One thing that helps a lot of the times is enrolling in something or setting up some sort of membership that forces you to go somewhere. So like the gym, right? That forces you to go at a certain time or join up a class. So every Tuesday at 3 p.m., right, you go to the gym, and that almost forces you to detach, right? Because you can't be exercising and you can't be doing a class while you're on the phone. So things that are going to occupy some of that space. For a lot of people, routine becomes really important into kind of categorizing it. So work, school, right? For most schools, they're not really allowing you to have your phone out, right? You have to kind of detach from it. The hard part comes establishing that, let's say in summer, right? When the school structure isn't quite there, that's where parents have to kind of be a little bit more strict and maybe get them involved in more sports and more activities to get them out the house and get them a little bit detached. But a lot of the times for the younger population, once they start actually doing things and being enrolled in them and find that there is fun in that too, it becomes a little bit easier to let go of it. A lot of times that addiction forces, it's almost like a quick dopamine rush, right? Like you check the Instagram or you check your Facebook and you feel good, right? Or you found something funny and then you feel good, and then it's down. It's like a quick release. But you can get that from other things. You can get that from doing art. You can get that from exercising, right? So if you're
That is
doing
true.
things that are kind of similar and you feel that same emotion, you're more apt to continue those and not just focus it only on social media or screen time. So it's a couple of things. It's kind of treating it as an addiction, trying to find other things that then can establish a little bit better routine that they enjoy, which is important. And that sometimes is a trial and error, right? Because not everyone loves the gym, not everyone loves art. So you have to kind of have them try a little bit of everything, find kind of what their niche is, and then see what else they have within that realm and let them get started, get enrolled in things. So yeah, it's a little bit of a work in progress, but it's doable. And it comes down to just establishing a little bit better routine than just the phone or just the tablet or just the computer.
So Melissa, and this is based on my experience, and I have all these questions, and I'm sure the audience and our listeners also have a gazillion questions. So our phones will be off the hook when we're done. Um, One thing that I've noticed in my experience,
Mhm.
that of course parents play a role. Without the parents' engagement and that structure, the child won't be successful really, unless the child has that maturity level to do it on his or her own.
Mhm.
But am I right till now?
Mhm. Yep.
But when you have a parent that you tell them, okay, so this is the importance of the treatment plan. This is the plan. This is the treatment. These are the alternatives. This is what we're going to try first, A, B, C, and D.
Mhm.
And if this doesn't work, then we're going to go with X, Y, Z, right? And here you are, provider, thinking that the parent is all there 100%. But guess what? The parent is as an abuser of social
Mhm.
media as the child. So how do you notice that? Because here I am with my child saying that my child is abusing of social media, right? It's sort of an addiction. It's like she or he is there 24/7, but I'm there 24/7. I'm not holding myself accountable. And probably I'm the tool that engage my child to be 24/7 in social media. How do you guys manage that? How do you pinpoint that it's the parent that maybe
Mhm.
needs the help as well?
Yeah, I think after a couple of visits, right? Because it's about accountability, right? So when they come back and we
Uh-huh.
say, well, what's changed or what has not changed and why? And if nothing changed, why? Why did it not change? And we'll start seeing, well, we got busy or something happened, or actually family was in that week. So a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
justifications, excuses, if you may, and kind of lets us know, okay, maybe that may happen once, but every time, right? There's something going on. And sometimes it is reflective. We know kids are observant from little
Mm-hmm.
into teenage years, and they kind of follow suit of what they see. So sometimes we end up kind of identifying that there's two issues, right? That it's the patient and then also their environment, which is the parent
Exactly.
at times, right? And so it becomes a group effort, right? If we're all going to reduce and work on screen time, the whole family is, right? So if, let's say, they are engaging in something outside of screen time or they're joining a gym, then the whole family can go to the gym, right? Hey,
Right.
from 5 to 6 after we eat dinner, we're going to go to the gym. Everyone does their own class, does what they want, but we're all going as a unit. And that kind of helps get everyone on the same page. But that happens a lot. It's not just to the young, right? We're all guilty of it. And like I said, some of us can curb it, some cannot, a little harder to. But yeah, we see that influence become really important in regards to family and parents, because they're the example. And if they're overusing and all they see is their parent is on the phone or scrolling, they're watching TV, but they're scrolling, well, that's gonna be something they're gonna mimic, likely to mimic. So
Right.
yeah, it becomes kind of a family unit, and that tends to be the best approach from it when we look at a support system, right? Family, if it's a close unit, especially with kids, that becomes a really close support system is the parents. So we want to kind of minimize the triggers, and one of those triggers may be seeing your family member, dad or mom or grandma, grandpa on the phone all the time, right? Well, if
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be on the phone and we're having a conversation, they're half connected, right? Half on the phone. Well, I'm going to scroll too, and I'm going to go play a game or do whatever. So it's being a
Right.
little bit more present and just taking a little bit of accountability, even the parents as well, to change.
One strategy that I use, I don't have children. So one strategy that I use with my husband is when we go out to a restaurant, we try to leave the phones
Mhm.
in the car. But to be honest with you, Melissa, for me is desperate mode because my parent is overseas. She does, she doesn't live
Mhm.
nearby. And how about if something happens? See that how the mind plays,
Yeah.
games, even
Mhm.
with the older population. How
Mhm.
about if something happens while I don't have my phone?
Mhm. But
So
that's
how
kind
do
of
you manage that? How,
that's that fear of missing out, like something's going to happen if I don't have my
okay.
phone. And then you have to kind of go backtrack a little bit and rationalize, right? And say, I'm going to be at the restaurant maybe 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, right? And if it's an emergency, someone will find a way to reach out to me, or I can address it, at that point afterwards. And if we look at kind of the reality of the just mathematics, the likelihood that something like that extreme will happen is probably low. The likelihood that someone's going to text you saying, hey, I need you to do this for tomorrow, that's not urgent, is probably more likely, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, you have to kind of work a little bit with that fear of missing out, that fear of like, oh, it's really important, what if, right? And we see a lot of those processes, that kind of catastrophizing happens with
Yes.
anxiety, right?
Yeah.
We try to tone that down, and we always try to look at it from a rational standpoint, right? And kind of see what's the likelihood that this will happen versus that, right? And the generalization of that is that it's less likely that an emergency will happen. It's much more likely that it's going to be something non-emergent that's going to more likely interrupt your conversation, right, of being present in that dinner with your husband or with family member, and not enjoy maybe as much as you should that day.
Do you think the culture or background has a lot to do with the overuse of social media within the youth population specifically? Do you think that culture has something to do? Because I've seen that in the Hispanic culture, but depends where in the Hispanic culture, a lot of parents, they don't go for, and even social status, they don't go for that cell phone. Kids don't have a cell phone, but then in the more advanced, if you will, um culture, everybody has a cell phone. Even if you can't afford it, here's a cell phone just in case.
Mhm.
But they don't plan ahead. Do you think culture has something to do with social media abuse between, among the young population?
It can slightly. I think more importantly is kind of what's been the family dynamics, right? What's been kind of
Okay.
the family history about it. Some family members are a little bit more attached to the phone. And even then, we're not talking about not having a phone. It's more the social media. It's the addiction to constantly scrolling. So you can still have the phone next to you in case someone makes a phone call to you.
Right.
That's fine. But it's the constantly scrolling more of the concern, because it disconnects you from it. So when you're looking at it from, let's say, an emergency basis, having the phone next to you isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's the fact that you're more likely to pick it up, right? If you don't have that boundary of like, oh, well, let me check real quick and see if anyone wrote me anything or anyone,
Oh
sent me
God,
a
yes.
message. You
Yes.
have access to it, right? The same theory of like dieting. If you're dieting, do you really want to keep the chips and the cookies in the pantry? No, it's a little bit of,
Yes.
it's temptation, right? You're likely to give in. So yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at it from that perspective. I don't necessarily think it's 100% culture. I think it has to do just with the family dynamics. There is definitely a tendency, if there's if mom, dad, grandparents have always been like, keep the phone, I need to contact you at all times. And yeah, right, that's gonna be passed down to you, and you're gonna, what if mom calls? What if dad calls? But again, just to kind of refocus it, it has nothing to do with having a phone, or a cell phone with you. It's more the aspect of not being present in what you're doing, or not doing other things because you're constantly on the social media side of it, right? That kind of isolates you and forces you. It could be hours, right, that you can be scrolling by the time you realize what you're doing.
Wow. Incredible. Incredible. So, what do you recommend? Okay, so I'm a young, a younger, I can't say young adult, but I'm 15 years old, 13 years old. Here I am with my Facebook or my Insta, because now that's what they
Mhm.
call it, or IG, which I just learned that that was Instagram the other day. I'm not into all this, right? I'm one that Googles all these acronyms. My goodness, because, you don't have Insta? And I'm like, I don't have a clue what that is. What do you mean? You know? So going back to my question, apps that are available online, here I am, 13, overuser of social media. My provider is recommending me an app online. So what apps would you recommend to maybe subsede my overuse of being, oh, how many likes do I have? I think that's what it is, really. That's social competition.
There is. That's one component of it for sure. There's that aspect of likes, comments, who got the most comments, who's more popular, right? It's kind of like a similar theme as before, right? Popularity, but just now focused on a social media aspect in forms of likes and comments. So yeah, I think that in a group like that, we want to look at trying to, like we said, limit the time. So there's a lot of apps that are available. Most common ones are called like Screen Zen, Unplug is one, Stay Focused is another one that can be used on the computer and the phone, but they help kind of set a timeline. So if your goal as you're working down on kind of letting go of social media and the addiction with it is trying to reduce maybe down to 45 minutes, for a lot of these apps, you can set a timer and say, I'm going to work on 45 minutes or 50 minutes total for the day. And it allows you to access those apps and access the ones that you list on there, access the social media. But once you hit that limit that you set 45, it blocks you out and almost sends you a reminder like, hey, you said 45 and I'm cutting you off. And so that helps keep you kind of accountable, right, for what you're setting to do, and be able to kind of do it with reminder of the phone, right, of the one thing that's kind of causing a lot of these issues. But those apps help to kind of just reduce the time use and keep you accountable and let you know when you surpass that. There's others that are a little bit like the Stay Focused is a little bit more interactive, and it can kind of tell you how much time in each social media platform that you use, and you know, did you like, let's say, override or snooze a little bit the timer, so you have a little bit of an idea of how you're doing, how well you're sticking to that plan. But they are very helpful. They're also helpful for, especially for the younger, when it comes to school, right? So when we have a lot of this distraction that happens from social media and other things, but social media in this case, it helps put a timeline so that, again, working on that routine, if you're allotting a certain time for social media, that gets accomplished, and then you're allowing another 2 hours, you know, for studying, and you can kind of set up certain parameters for each one. So I think it helps in regards to accountability and helping kind of set up that routine, and lets you know how you're doing realistically, right? Whether you're close to achieving that goal, or maybe you're not hitting that mark, and that those are points to maybe communicate with a therapist and try to troubleshoot it a little bit the next visit you have.
Do these apps measure? Do you know?
Measure what?
So or keep a record of how many times I snoozed, or how many,
Oh yeah,
you know, oh, they do. So the
yeah, they do.
provider can actually say, okay, so I'm going to recommend this app, right?
Mhm,
I don't know. This is just
mhm,
me for an example. Stay focused, for example. I
mhm,
just like the word. It really attracts, right? The stay focused. And the provider could say on the next visit, okay, let's look at that app. How many times you snoozed, or how many,
mhm,
you know, which for the parent and the child would be beneficial for both, because
mhm,
children, they mimic what they see in adults, right? So if the parent is doing the Stay Focused app, which, right, would
mhm.
be a good idea,
Yeah.
because that child is mimicking the parent, they're going to do the Stay Focused app, and they're going to do the same thing.
Mhm.
So, you know, it makes it easier, I guess, to take control of that, um, of what we see as an addiction, if you will, of
Mhm.
overuse of social media.
Yeah.
Super interesting. Super
And it
interesting.
can also give a little bit of an idea because we see patterns, right? So we see that maybe it's on Saturdays that you tend to snooze a little bit more, or maybe it's the afternoons that are a little tougher, you know, to kind of stay on target, but you do find when you're a little busier throughout the day. So kind of helps point out a little bit maybe where you need to restructure, where you need to add in another activity, right? To kind of help distract or have another outlet, right? For let's say entertainment in that case.
And probably instead of promoting so much, well, this would go to the social media platforms, not necessarily to the parents, but probably, instead of marketing so much, hey, your likes and all these filters that I don't even know how to get to, for crying out loud. And it's because I have no clue of social media.
Mhm.
Maybe because I'm my generation wasn't brought up with social media. So for me, that's not a priority. My priority is having my phone just in case something happens, right? That's just
Mhm.
me. Um, but having all these social media platforms and this marketing that this is the best thing, that you'll be famous, if you will, or your 30-second of fame. um it's so attracting, and at the same time I feel that it's bullying, or even a little bit uh belittling other people, right? Because you put this filter and it's going to show no lines, and you're going to be very, very skinny, and maybe that's the dream of this
Mhm.
young girl, and maybe instead of helping, it is not helping, and probably giving more low self-esteem.
Yeah, I
You know
think
what I mean? How do you
there's
feel about that? Because really,
yeah, there's definitely that aspect of it, and that's why I mentioned it has to do a lot with what's the underlying issue. For a lot of people, it can be self-esteem, right? They see perfect images, they see no lines, no wrinkles, perfect weight. And in that sense, that's kind of what they think that becomes the norm to them. And they compare themselves, they look at themselves maybe in the mirror and they see the lines and they see maybe a little bit more weight than that person. And the thought is, well, I'm not good enough. And so
right.
that becomes one of the big issues that is helpful to address, right? And identify that in therapy, because then you have to work on your positive image and trying to accept yourself, right? Or work towards whatever goal it is that you want to feel a little bit more comfortable. So I think in that portion, it becomes important.
If you look at it in different ways, it could be so positive if we were allowing ourselves to look for positive information through social media. About probably the president of ABC country, or why is the earth round? Things like that, right? Um, Access to our providers, access to our primary care physician, and access to Harmony, our mental health provider. Social, the internet world is itself a positive. Unfortunately, social media has made it to a way that, what, it's more important than everything else. Tell you, there's great things out there in the internet. You can watch the news. Again, you can see your providers. There are so many tools, so many options for us out there through the internet. But then again, we go to social media and we use it for either I'm
Yeah.
competing. So what preventive measures does Harmony suggest, and
Mhm.
do you suggest, as well as a provider, to our young ones? Because really, you can be yourself, and be great.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is going to be, and we mentioned it a little bit before, is working on yourself, right? Working on those things that are causing you to hyper focus on social media. So whether that be self-esteem, whether that be addressing your emotional health and addressing that first, that becomes precedent. I think secondary to that becomes having a better support system, having other coping mechanisms, right, for stress, for anxiety. And we all have that. It's normal part of kind of your day to day, but what can we do outside of just kind of sitting on a couch or on the bed and
Yes.
scrolling? So whether that be, focusing on reading, right? Whether that be exercise, whether that be hanging out with friends, right? Making a point to get lunch or do something after work or after school to have a little bit better of a life balance and not be as sedentary. I think one of the big factors that happens with social media is it causes you to be very isolated, right? You seem connected, right? Because you're technically talking to other people or liking other people's pictures or commenting, but you're not there, you're not present, and you're sitting in the same room under the same four walls, right? So it becomes a little bit isolating. And when you're done scrolling, you look around and you're in the room, right? And
Then
you could
what?
be in the room all day or all night. So in that aspect, you have to have some sort of a balance. And so that becomes kind of the, let's say, preventative ways, right? To not fall into that hyper focus with social media or that addiction with social media. And that's a good point of education for a lot of people that are found in that spot.
I'm going to be honest with you. I've seen people, adults and younger and adolescents, forget how to socialize. Literally,
Mm-hmm.
they are so into an object that they have no. They forget. And then they tell you, "Oh, I'm not a social person." You were once upon a time. What happened? What changed?
Yeah, the socialization aspect does get quite affected, right? When we're stuck on tablets and we're used to texting, a lot of the times we forget tone, right? We forget approach through texting, through social media, right, and commenting, and it becomes a little bit overstimulating when they're out in groups, when there's a lot of people talking to them, or even just picking up the phone, right, to do a call. It's
And
overstimulating because they're not used to that. They're used to
yeah,
being behind a screen.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly. My
so yeah,
goodness.
that overstimulation, but it's workable, right? So it's something where we look at kind of almost a perspective of like exposure therapy. So if you see yourself isolating, if you see yourself, you've been in that pattern maybe for a while. So little by little, right? Call versus texting, or meet up with a friend versus just talking to them online, and kind of reintroduce yourself into the stimulation, the sounds, the people, the communication, the tone, right? And eventually you get used to it and it's not as anxiety inducing, and then you get the socialization hang
Yes.
of it, right? But that is one of the negatives, let's say, with social media. It does isolate you and you become just sentences, right?
And that's a good takeaway, make it a habit to at least once a week go out there and just talk, or probably do volunteer work,
Yeah.
where you have to communicate, or if Harmony United Psychiatric Care is out there promoting our services, the ones that are a little bit more shy can also take advantage of going out there and saying at least good afternoon, until you get used to saying good afternoon, my name is, right?
Yeah.
And that's the next step. So
Little by little.
it's little by little, but and this way we go back into what was once a group, not a tablet or a phone, or hi. I feel so disconnected because I'm not used to it. Again,
Mhm.
I'm a different generation, so I don't understand why it's so attracting, right?
Mhm.
So one of the takeaways for me is go out there,
Yeah.
socialize with people. Any other takeaways other than the tools that you provided, um, the apps that you provided? Any other takeaways that can come out naturally that you could think of? I know this is a big question because
I, yeah, I think the biggest thing is just moderation. It's not necessarily to look down on social media. I think that's important to kind of reiterate. It has its benefits, it has its negatives as well, as do many things. And it's just about kind of moderating it. That's the theme with everything, with food, right? With the good, the bad. Moderation becomes kind of the key to managing it and keeping it on the positive side as far as the impact on that person's life. So if we look at it that perspective, and if we try to kind of compare it to other things, like for example, caffeine, right? Caffeine, we know if too much will have some issues in regards to your physical health, right? In general, your productivity, but 1 cup or 2 cups of coffee, for example, are okay, right? Or
Mhm,
one soda a day
I
is okay.
agree.
So it's about that moderation. If you look at it from that perspective and understand that it can be part of someone's life without being necessarily a negative thing, I think that makes it a little bit more approachable to handle, right? To address. without instilling fear or causing it to be an all or nothing, which sometimes happens, right? You're either on this side of it or you're on that side of it, but there's no understanding of it can be here, right? It can be in the middle and make it something beneficial to us.
So we're getting closer to the end, but I don't want to leave without sharing that, yes, I have attacked social media on this podcast. Absolutely. But you know what? I appreciate social media as well because it has given me the opportunity to reunite, even though it's through a cell phone or through a laptop, with my family that I don't see in other states or in England, because I do have family in England. So that I appreciate. I have been able to control, right, the use of social media. Again, maybe because my maturity level is different, right, than the adolescents. Absolutely. But my promotion to all this and my takeaway is everything that you said. Time it, go out there, find what you love, find
Mhm.
something that you love doing with your hands, or if
Mhm.
you love volunteering or talking, if you love marathons, go ahead and do that. Use social media to register, right? And yeah, post that picture if you're, I don't know, in first place or 100 place. Who cares? You made it.
Yeah.
You went to that marathon. You did what you needed to do. We're not competing with anyone. And I
Yeah.
think that is something that we need to promote. And that's the negative, if you will, of social media, that it's all a competition. It's really
Mhm.
not. If we use it for the right reasons, it could be a great tool, not an addictive tool, not the scrolling tool. It could be a great tool, not only for us to learn more, but also to be with our families and to be able to see them right
Mhm.
from afar and feel that they're near us.
Yeah. It's a
So
great source of expression for sure.
absolutely. So how can our listeners contact Harmony United Psychiatric Care for support or for more information?
So we have two formats. So our website, which is hupcfl.com, and there's information there in regards to the different offices, treatments we provide, services, as well as some of the providers as well, locations. And then our main line, which is 800-457-4573, which you can call and set up appointment once you do a little bit of research and see kind of the services you're looking for.
Melissa, this has been a great topic, and I do look forward in talking about other topics that do affect us. I do agree with your statement that mental health has been underserved. And I am very grateful that Harmony United Psychiatric Care provides quality to our patients. Harmony is detailed, respectful, empathetic to our patients, and understands very well what mental health issues we encounter on a day by day, and is there to help us, to support us, and to make us feel better, because that's the goal, to be
Yeah,
happy.
absolutely.
So I truly appreciate you and all the information that you gave me, and all the questions being answered, and I hope we reconnect soon with another great topic.
I appreciate it. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Thank you, listeners.